Here come the hot topics from a higher perspective.
Hi, welcome guys to the Higher View, second episode, second week, brand new year, Friday the 13th, all is good. So welcome to the Higher View. Today our topic is going to be based on fear, but in a positive way, because everything we do is going to be from a higher view. So I just like to, I hope you guys had a chance to see our first episode. We really had a great time. And so I'll open up and just give my thoughts of fear. When I think of fear myself, I remember as a small child, I was afraid of the dark. And again, I've always had this connection to higher self source, what I call now my higher self. At that time at 5, I did not know what to call it, but it was a strong connection. And I clearly remember one night getting in bed, and I was, my mom turned off the light and closed the door, and I'm laying under the covers, fearful. And I clearly heard within, there's nothing to fear except fear itself. Mm-hmm. And I said, wow, I'm hearing that. I know that's true. I mean, it didn't take away all of my fear like overnight. Actually, what took away my fear overnight was when I awoke into the universal truth of oneness in 2007. So many, many, many years later as an adult. Once I understood that we are all God, connected to God, connected to each other, there is no separation. Once I knew that, like not believe it, but knew that to be true, all my fears went away. And I even say this a lot of times. I'll ask people, what does God have to fear? If you know that you are source, having a human experience, universe, source, God, whatever name you want to use, for all that is, that's my name. That is my name for all that is everything. I mean, the trees, I'm looking at beautiful trees across the road. I'm looking at the grass. I'm looking at leaves. Well, most of the leaves are on the ground because it's winter here in the Northeast Pennsylvania, in the Poconos, and the trees are bare. But I know that's God. I know this desk in front of me has life in it. Anything you put under a high-powered microscope, you see the tiny particles we call atoms. You see they're moving. So that movement means it has life. It has energy. So when I think of fear, for me, it doesn't exist anymore in my world. But I do understand that the propaganda that we've been kind of bombarded with, messed up on that word, but from the mainstream news, the mainstream media, that is their favorite weapon. It is a weapon for them, is fear, is to keep the masses in a state of fear. Because when we're in a state of fear, we're not operating from our heart. We're not operating from our heart center. When we're in a state of fear, it's that flight or fight nature, that human nature. It's fight or flight. And where we have knee-jerk actions if we get afraid. And that all comes from what I call the monkey mind, the limited monkey mind. And so we don't want to operate from a place of fear. We want to operate from a place of love, which is the opposite. And fear is just the absence of love. So it's still all one. Love is the highest frequency. Fear is one of the lowest frequency, if not the lowest frequency. I don't really know which one. There's so many low frequencies. I don't know which one is more lower in vibration than the other. I know unconditional love is the highest vibration. And when we can step back in a situation now, getting like, say something happens and you're like, ooh, you get that instant feeling of fear. That's a time to take a deep breath. That's a time to breathe in, take a few deep breaths, even before you respond, if you can. I mean, that's all up to each one of us are on an awakening journey to who we truly are. So each one is in a different place. So there's no judgment on how you respond to fear. That's number one, because when you know that we're all connected, we're all one, we're all a part of each other and a part of all that is, there is no judgment on how another person reacts to fear. It may be not how you would react, but what you can do, you can recognize that they're in fear and kind of just send them love and light, give them encouraging words. But you want to try, because there's only two places that we motivate. Everything we do comes from either one of two places. It comes from love, unconditional love, or it comes from fear. Yeah. So we want to try to always act in a way from love. Okay, I'd love for one of my co-hosts, Victoria, to chime in on her thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. So we started having this conversation about what today's topic was going to be based on a story that I think Kathy passed forward about how the next big virus is coming. And so we started really talking about how these fear-based stories are everywhere. The media uses them to keep people in fear, and the so-called truther community is also using it. It may not be intentionally to keep people in fear, but that's exactly what's happening. So all these stories that come out, I live in California where we've been pummeled with rain for the first time in a decade. And so the media uses these stories to keep people in fear. It's fascinating because you don't see the story of the person who goes across the street to help their neighbor who's being flooded out. What you see is, oh, the houses are being flooded out. And so I think what happened is that there are people who discovered psychologically what fear does. And fear is incredibly profitable. One, because people are easily addicted to fear. It's like that you got to watch the train wreck just because there's a train wreck. So they understand that's addiction to fear. And that's why it's also in all the movies. It's actually written into the storyline of every movie, how there's a big situation. And so what that does is it actually triggers, as Caroline said, it triggers our flight and fight response. And that there is also an addiction to the adrenaline that those stories create. So people keep going back for more, not even knowing it's because the adrenaline rush that they get from watching those stories. But the media and the film industry know that, and it's incredibly profitable. And so it's really up to us to understand that that's really what's going on here. It's really, in essence, a social manipulation. And to really, and they're so good at it, they do what I call fear disguised as love. So even our religiosities do this. When the preacher gets up in the front of the room and spews all his fear at the audience, it's to keep the audience coming back and paying penance to that particular preacher. And so it's really, really important for us to really understand the difference and how fear is used intentionally to manipulate humanity. And when we recognize there, as Caroline said, there really is nothing to fear except fear itself, which is, the acronym of false evidence appearing real. Well, what that really means is that it's a false story of what there is to be afraid of, even when there isn't any evidence of that thing to be afraid of. And so let's remember that these stories are being put in our face to keep us in fear. And I have to share one thing really quick that was a really big recognition for me. My son, I have a teenage son, and he asked me a couple of weeks ago about the difference between, I was explaining to him not to, because there might be some side effects. And he said, so Mom, you're always talking about how the media is spewing fear. How is what you're telling me any different? And I really sat with that. And what I realized is the difference is, as a child, it's my responsibility to help him teach him how to make better choices. And so as parents, we might tell our child, don't do that because you might get hurt. That's not spewing fear. That is teaching our children how to make better choices out of love. Where the media does it for the purpose of money, of driving, because fear is profitable, versus explaining to our children how to make a choice so they don't get hurt. So it's this, to me, that was the same as explaining to my kids, don't put your hand in the fire, you might get burned. We do that out of love. Now, if I were the media, I would spew up a whole bunch of stories of people who have gotten burned by the fire to the degree that our kids would never want to build a fire again. Or don't touch the hot stove, you might get burned, and then terrorize the poor kids so they never want to cook anything. That's the difference between explaining something not out of love so they don't get hurt,
right,
and explaining something in a way that is spewing fear because it creates attention and it's profitable. And fear is great for controlling people. So there are people who have figured out how to use fear as a means of control. So as we're having this conversation, take a look at what you're seeing in the world around you. And are you falling for the fear? Or are you rising above it? As we often say, rise above the fear. And once you start to recognize the fear and how it is often what I call fear disguised as love. So another perfect example is, if you don't do this, that means you don't love your family. If you don't believe this, then you're going to get hurt. If you don't do this, it means you don't love humanity. If you don't, if you see that word "if" in there, stop and really take a look at that and see if there's a manipulation tactic that's in there. That's one really good way to recognize fear disguised as love. And so I just wanted to bring that forward, because one of the things I talk about all the time is fear-based beliefs. So what Caroline was saying is unconditional love's at the top. Well, what is that at the bottom? Well, it's all of the beliefs that are based in fear. The guilt, shame, resentment, blame, judgment, victimization, all those are fear-based. And it's up to us to recognize how fear is being utilized in our own consciousness, not just in the world around us.
Yeah, I remember as a very young girl growing up in the Catholic school, Catholic religion, and Catholic upbringing. And I remember my mother would say, the only thing you should fear is God. God is the only one that can punish you. But I made a connection at a very young age that my mother was trying to control me using God, because she had nothing else I was uncontrollable. And so growing up, I realized, and I experimented with different religions, all of them had a fear control mechanism built into their sermons, built into their groups and their organizations. And it's interesting today how we see it all over, just like you said, Victoria. We see it on the news, and everybody's trying to control us with fear. And I think that would be the important message to let everyone know. When you feel controlled, or you feel like it's controlling you, it probably is. And that's when we need to turn, like Caroline said, we need to turn to love. Just take a step back and say, wait a second here, let me assess this. Is this something that I should be afraid of because somebody's telling me I should be afraid, or does it really make me afraid? And if it does really make us afraid, I think we come back to love. I know for me, it always works to start communicating with my ancestors, with my angels, with all of the ascended masters, to push me through that fear, and making sure that it's not something that's trying to control me, as opposed to me overcoming these fears. I think it's a great subject. Thank you so much. Kathy, what about your perspective?
Well, I have several. First of all, I agree that fear is the contrast of love. And I believe that if we didn't have fear, we might not have this amount of growth that we're having, as far as from a personal development side. I mean, even being apprehensive before we start the show is a small fear. So people that are showing up big and brave and saying their truth and showing the way of the new earth, the new concepts, all have to push through their fears. And it might even be from past lives where you were burned at the stake for saying those things or doing those things. And so fear can be good if you are aware of it, identify it, and then use it. And what I wanted to share is I was able to take a class, 5 different classes called Avatar back 18, 19 years ago. And I still use this process all the time called the creation handling procedure. And what it is, it's a way to get out of fear besides breathing or meditating or laughing. I thought Goddess Gloria was going to talk about laughing. But anyway, the creation handling procedure is, in a nutshell, if you picture the yin yang symbol, where one side is white and one side is black. And what you do is you take the fear, let's put it in the black side because it's scarier. It's like night. So you feel it, and then you flip to the opposite. And you're actually putting yourself through this process of feel the fear, then feel the love. And then you keep expanding it. So you may expand it up maybe 10 times or more. So you're really viscerally feeling the fear. And then what you do is you step out of it because you see it. It's its own entity. And you say, this is not I, this is my creation. I choose to discreate it. And what happens is at that point, you've processed the whole experience to the max, because it can be 20 feet wide at that point if you've really gone deep. But when you release it, you're at 0 point. And then you can choose love. But it's really hard to go straight to the opposite without going to that 0 point. So I just wanted to share that because I think fear, that when we talk about the spin that's out there and that there's always going to be another boogeyman. I mean, that's just the way they've set up this game that we're in. And so it's a test to see how much you can stay in your heart and how willing you are to help others, because that's another way to get out of your self-doubt or pity or whatever you have, is to be in service. So anyway, so what do you think, Geraldine?
Yeah, thank you so much. Amazing comments. The way I love that you brought up that it's difficult to go from love to fear. But one of the things that I discover in my practice is that after going into deep regression or going deep into our emotional history and understanding, that we discover that our connection with love and our understanding of love, unfortunately, because not many of us have experienced unconditional love, not even always from our mother or from our father. I mean, it's something that we as humans have not quite been familiar with. It's something that we have to teach ourselves. We are all pioneers in understanding what unconditional love is. And it's something that we have to become familiar with, as you said, through the steps of feeling the love, getting familiar with peace, getting familiar with compassion, getting familiar with acceptance. And this takes me to my next topic, because we live in a dualistic expression here, we require both balance, to maintain balance in every aspect of our reality. So in order to see that balance, we have to maintain that balance internally, which means that we have to be aware of our shadows first. We have to know our deepest, darkest parts, because those are the parts that we become slaves to the things that we don't know about our own selves, our deepest fears. And the question is, well, how can you possibly know everything, all the deepest, darkest shadows of yourself? Well, unconditional love means to be able to see all things as a part of yourself. And so to recognize within the fear, within the shadow, within what we see as separate from ourselves, to begin to see, we're going to discover that a lot of that is a mirror within us. The things that we judge, the things that we see outside that cause fear, is actually things that subconsciously we are deeply programmed to see as separate, and why. So when we start going into those questions, we can really begin to tap into a level of understanding of yourself, where you begin to, again, transcend, go into the higher view of things. And we're working with all the information and programs that we are made up of, because we are inheriting layers and layers of ancestral traumas and belief systems and programs from religion, society, politics. Every aspect of our world has kind of been designed from the inside out, where this manipulation that you're talking about addresses the primal parts of human. When a human is in survival, they don't have the time or the nervous system in order to be able to observe things from that neutral perspective that can be the middle point of that duality, you know. So we are manipulated through this fear in society by how we feel safe, whether or not we feel safe in our bodies or in our environments, whether our relationships are safe or whether we are going to feel good in our relationships, and whether we're going to feel empowered or where we have access to empowerment. And we are manipulated by fear and anger primarily, and our desires. So these are the primary things that our marketing industry utilizes to manipulate the five senses and keep us paralyzed. And because most of us don't spend a lot of time getting familiar with those parts of ourselves, then it's very easy to kind of come into these unknown, not knowing where to go. So I always teach that the best tool is to train yourself to come into neutrality. How do you come into neutrality? Is to come into the state of non-judgment. Whatever it is, non-judgment, observe, process, and understand that all things can be ranges and are an expression of this duality from the lowest to the highest. This is actually, that neutrality is where love, real love, unconditional love actually emerges. So yeah, that's my take.
So true, so true. And the neutral, like you said, the neutrality is the oneness, is the understanding that there is nothing separate from you. And yes, the 3D matrix, as I call it, that we've lived in for many, well, all my life. I just turned 61 yesterday. So for 61 years in this lifetime, in this 3D matrix, yes, it is that yin yang symbol, which is perfect, the perfect symbol of God. So one of the things I always stress to people is when you look at the yin yang symbol, that's God. So God is light and shadow. I like to say shadow instead of dark, but whatever terminology you want to use, it's all God. And yes, you have to, yes, each one of us has light and shadow within us. And we have to embrace, we can't push away what we're afraid of. We can't, push it away, because if you try to push it away, it's coming back stronger. Basically, what you resist persists. You have to take a look at your shadow and you have to embrace it with the light, so the light can transform it back to the light from which it came. But we're living in such a special time right here, 2023. And it actually started 2020. We're in the midst of humanity's great awakening. And humanity is at a crossroad. So especially in this year, I truly believe this is such a special year. It's year 7. If you look at it numerologically, it's a 7 year. It's such a special year because I believe that everything we've seen over the last 3 years is going to shift very drastically this year. And it's up to each one of us individually and collectively. Individually, we have to decide within us to what direction do we want to go? Do we want to go to that unity, oneness consciousness? Or do we want to keep thinking that everything is separate and everything is not a part of me, so I can hurt that person, or I can go bomb that country because it's separate from me? So so yes, we are right now in what I call 4D. We are still in this duality consciousness, but we want to try our best, and it's different for each person. We want to integrate to that neutrality, to that oneness. What Geraldine said about everything, like, I do not judge anything that happens or anyone. I'll step back. I may not like what they're doing. I might like, oh wow, I wouldn't do that. But still, I'll say to myself, I wouldn't do that. But that is a sovereign divine being of light doing that. And so I'll try to step back and not react. Because when if something dramatic happens right in front of me, because time is not what we think it is, we still have time to step back, take a breath, and respond with love instead of reacting with that knee-jerk fear-based reaction. And as far as the media, I know people have been saying this since 2020. People have been saying, oh yeah, the media is doing this and everything's happening because of money, money, money. I disagree. It's not money, it's control. They already have all of the money. They do. They have all of the money. Right now, for them, it's control. They have an agenda and they want to control each one of us, and they want us to. I say the mask is, to me, that means shut up and comply. That's all that means. That's the symbol. Like, put that on, because we want you to shut up and comply. And we're going to use fear to make you shut up and comply. So I think for me, it's more about right now where we are in humanity's history. It's more about control than money, because they already have all the money. So what we have to do, we have to open our eyes, see what really is happening in the world. And so many people have awakened in the last 3 years. It is a blessing. The pandemic, scamdemic, shamdemic is the greatest blessing to humanity, because that was the shadow. We needed that shadow to wake us up. The shadow has a purpose, because it's all God. And yes, it's a game. I say we're not in a spiritual warfare. We're in a spiritual chess match, and the light has already won. So when you know, okay, nothing to be afraid of, because I know the light is so much more powerful than the shadow. The shadow could never overtake the light. So as each of us awaken individually and collectively, and it's already a done deal, we know humanity's awakening is assured. 5D New Earth is here already. It's a frequency. It's not a place. So when we raise our frequency, and in every now moment, choose love. Every now moment, choose love, and move and walk through your life in love. Before you know it, we're going to all be on 5D. Yeah, just loving each other.
I love that, Caroline. I wanted to mention a little bit about fear. And sometimes we may be in fear and everybody around us can recognize it except for us. I've been in that position, and I see many people going through this recovery of the pandemic still through so much fear, and they can't see the fear, but everyone else can. And so when it comes to fear and love, I think it's important to understand what both of those do. Fear pushes opportunities away, pushes people away, pushes your dreams away. Love pulls everything closer. It pulls together the people, places, and things that you need to direct you on your course, and brings everyone harmoniously, where fear keeps pushing people away. So I think it's important to gauge ourselves. Where are we in our life? Am I acting out of fear? Well, are the people around me avoiding me? Do they not want to work with me? Do they not like talking to me? Or do the people gravitate where they want to know more, where they want to engage? And I think that's the important thing. One of the things that I love, I think, Kathy, you mentioned you thought I was going to talk about laughter, because laughter does change our perception. And that's one of the things that can shift us. So if I'm afraid, let's just say, for example, that I become afraid to go into a public place and I feel compelled to put on the mask. I can just take a step back and say, wait a second here, let me look at this. Does that fear, does that control come from childhood where I'm being channeled, where I'm thinking that I'm still back, or am I now realizing, hey, you know what, I'm an adult and I can make my own choices, and instead of choosing fear, I choose love. I think it's really important to know that one pushes away and one brings everything closer together to us. What do you think, Goddess Victoria?
I would agree with that. I have heard that before, of the push and pull, that fear pushes and that love magnetizes. So we all get to choose how we move through life. Are we going to be pushed around by fear, or are we going to choose love to magnetize toward us the life that we desire, that we wish to create? And so it's really interesting seeing how these two play together in this reality we're creating. And I remember the first time these concepts started coming to me about 10, 12 years ago, or however long ago. And I remember somebody telling me that fear is the opposite of love. And I sat with that because of course, what we've been told since forever is that hate is the opposite of love. Well, if hate is the opposite of love, how can fear be the opposite of love? And then as I learned more and more and tuned into my own understanding and the truth that love is all that is, God is love, therefore love is all that is. If God is all it is and all that is, it's God, therefore love is all that is. And I thought, well, if love is all it is, then how can fear be the opposite of love? And when I really, really sit with that, I started to understand that fear is just the lowest vibration of love. It is the belief in the absence of love. But love is always there. It is ever present. It is all it is. Fear is just the lowest vibration of that. And so the way for me, when I started to really understand how fear is an aspect of love, it's like that yin yang, how there's the dark, but there's still the white circle that's within the darkness. So one way to describe fear is how, as a parent, I go back to being a mom, the fear that your child's going to run out in the street and get hit by a car is real. The reason we fear that is because of love. If we didn't have love for that child, we wouldn't fear them getting hurt. If we didn't have love for ourselves, we wouldn't have a need for self-preservation. So fear exists within the love itself. So if we just flip the script back to see how everything is love, and that fear actually serves love. Darkness actually serves light. And I know that's a really hard thing for people to grasp, but the darkness exists for us to see the light. And if the darkness didn't exist, we wouldn't know the light. And we knew that when we chose to incarnate as human beings. We knew we were going into the contrast. And it's like this video game. I talk about it as being a chess game sometimes, but a lot of times I use video game because, well, that's just where we are right now for humanity. Now, we chose to play this game of contrast. And the great quest, if you will, is to see if we could find our light within the darkness and to see if we could remember love within the fear. That's the ultimate goal, right? As a soul having a human experience. Can we remember who we really are? Can we remember what love really is? Deep diving into this dark place. And so what's happening in the world now is that enough people are starting to remember what love really is as the essence of all that is, that we're collectively starting to move up the spiritual spiral. What Caroline called 4D, I refer to as the spiritual spiral. Some people call it the bridge between the 3D and the 5D. I refer to it as the spiritual spiral between the fear-based reality and the love-based reality. And collectively, we are creating a new reality based in love. That's new earth. That's, the words that are being thrown around right now. Enough of humanity is starting to wake up and seeing the role that fear has played. And we're choosing to move up that spiritual spiral into unconditional love. And the role that fear plays in that is to it actually is to help us remember that love is all that is, and that the light is shining on the darkness so that we can see the shadows, so that we can process them and rise above them. So the reason everything looks so dark right now is because there's so much light being shed on them. And the fear is basically exposing itself because there's so much love on the planet now. So rather than focusing on the fear, how can we bring love into it? Where can we see that love is playing a role in this? And as Geraldine said, you can't, and Kathy both said, it's not like you go from fear to love instantly, because we've been living in fear for so long. Thousands and thousands of years we've been living in fear. So it's a process of catching ourselves. Am I in fear? How can I look at this from another perspective so that I'm not afraid? How can I see this with more loving eyes? How does this situation actually for my greatest good? What am I intended to learn from this experience so I don't repeat it again? That the fear actually exists as a medium for growth. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is, if you imagine a seed, when you have a seed of life, it gets planted in the darkness, it gets planted in the fear, and a lot of growth actually happens in the darkness. Before that plant ever comes up into the light, it's doing a lot of root work. And that's how it is for humanity. We've been in this fear-based reality where we are extrapolating all of the lessons in that darkness. And as we spring into the light, and then we can look at them and go, oh yeah, look at all the lessons I learned in that. Now I can grow and expand up into the light. And so what's happening for humanity is that, we've been living in this reality where the majority of humanity is down here in fear, and a few people are cycling up to the top. What's starting to happen is that's being reversed, where there will only be a few people left at the bottom in the fear, and most of humanity will be up here in unconditional love. And we're all moving up that cone-shaped spiral, and all of us in our own way, in our own process, and in our own time. And so rather than looking at the fear and holding resentment and againstness toward it, which themselves are actually fear-based constructs, resentment, blame, victimization, those are all based in fear. So rather than feeding more resentment into the fear, our job is to learn how to send love into it so that we can transmute it. I'm going to pass it over to Kathy, or who wants to go next?
I was going to say, I think one of the good things you mentioned about fear is that it means we're growing. Not just that, but fear means we're alive. And the more fear you have, the more alive we are. I see it as moving in a positive direction. If I didn't have any fears, it probably means I'm sedentary, not moving forward, being still. And so maybe we can see fear as an opportunity to move forward, to grow, to decide what we choose. When we're confronted with the situation, do I choose to move forward in love, or do I choose to move forward in fear? And sometimes it might be important to move forward in fear when we have that basic instinct to protect ourselves or our loved ones. Fear is important. It's not always something that we have to eliminate, but it is definitely a sign that we're alive and we're moving forward. I think Kathy was going to say something. You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, so I have lots of things I could say. One of the things that I'd like to bring up as a planting a seed, and I love, Victoria, your whole analogy of the gardening idea, because there is something about us right now that we're seed dreaming. We're seeds going into this new earth, this new age. And one of the things I wanted to suggest is that when we go into fear, we automatically envision and imagine the worst case scenario. But what if we envisioned the best case scenario and called that in? Because we're much more powerful than we know. And the cycle can be broken by going to that center place and then reframing the program. So let's say you are afraid of going to a party, and that stemmed from a 5-year-old. You were a 5-year-old and you went to a party, and it was difficult for you, or somebody made fun of you. And so somewhere in your adult life, you still have trepidation before you go to a party. Well, what if instead of seeing the rejection or the pain that you experienced, you flipped it to see what you really want to create? Because this is a system, the capability of us to manifest in this world, in this game, is your mind will create solutions for you if you keep calling in what you want. So the idea of us always going to the worst case can be flipped to the best case. So Geraldine, what do you think about that?
Perfect segue into what I wanted to share, because I'm so glad that you brought that up, because if we break down the process of fear, every emotion that we have has layers, and you can discover that by, and I really invite everyone to try this out, making a list of all the emotions that you know and sitting with them and seeing what they are doing in your body, how they make you feel, what tenses up when you feel one emotion, let's say fear, and kind of unpack. There's many layers, there's sub layers to emotions. You will find more emotions, more thoughts, more programs underneath that. So when we take a look at fear, essentially the first thing that we do is judge, because because this is a survival mechanism to see whether we're safe in whatever it is that's happening. Whether it's something we watch on TV, whether it's something our partner says to us, we want to know, are we safe? And essentially, that is kind of an assessment of, are we separate or are we united? That's essentially what we are trying to understand subconsciously. And the worst case scenario, as you were saying, when you do this process of going into the layers of the emotions, that what most people fear subconsciously, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be the most simple thing. It could be the mother not giving love and attention to the child by giving a look away or not giving attention. The human fears death, essentially. This is the worst case scenario. How do we reach death through whatever experience that's happening? So what we want to do, and this is something that's heavily practiced in Eastern religions, which is a wonderful practice, is to become familiar with death. What does it feel like to go to the process of death? And what we discover through that work is that you are energy, you are frequency. Wherever your attention goes, because you are energy, your frequency, that's where your energy will be directed. And essentially, this ability to understand where you are directing your energy, you discover that what we fear the most in that death is essentially the unknown. We fear the unknown. So I always advise my clients to become friends with the unknown and with experiencing the unknown, being in the presence of the unknown. The more that we get acquainted with how it feels like emotionally in your nervous system, the way you're reacting, the way you're responding to the unknown, the more empowered you will feel. And there's an entire biophysical, bioelectrical, background to how that actually functions. But it's actually one of the most empowering ways to embody and to learn how to train yourself to overcome and build up and become familiar with the full spectrum of emotions, from fear to love. And you'll discover very, very quickly that by becoming friends with the unknown, you will be able to come into a state of non-judgment, a place of unity consciousness. And as humans, we are here to experience through the duality how to become one with everything, within ourselves, the wars that we have internally, and the wars that we see and we create externally. So that would be an invitation for people, whoever.
So true. It's what everything you said is so true, because we came here to experience it all. There is no judgment of fear, because fear is part of the experience you came to You came here to experience it. You came to, and I say this a lot, and I said it before, but I really want to stress upon it, is that our greatest challenges in life are our greatest blessings. It's so we planned it from spirit before we were born. We chose to come here. We planned our life, and then when I say we planned our life, it's not a straight line. It looks like a spider web. Okay, it because destiny, our soul plan, and free will exist at the same time. So we make a plan, and we're gonna plan. We plan challenges for our soul, but as we encounter those challenges, how we react to those challenges is all free will. So the both go hand in hand. But our greatest challenges are our greatest blessing. Just like I said, the pandemic, scamdemic, shamdemic, that's what I call it, was the greatest blessing for humanity. My higher self gave me the download in March 2020. Humanity's great awakening has begun. Those of you that have been on this spiritual path and studying spirituality for a while will know that in the spiritual world, we've been talking about the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening is like, yeah, when is it going to happen? When is this going to? We're in the midst of it. We are living at the greatest time, and all of it, every part of it serves us. So the fear, the love, and everything in between, it serves us. And when we realize and own that I created that. When anything happens, I own it. And I was like, I created that. I created that for a reason. And everything I create is for my highest good. Now, as a mom who's both children, I have 2 children and they're both in spirit. And for me to create that, you would think, what in my humanness? No, my avatar did not. From my lower self did not. But my higher self created that, and it created it from, because my higher self knows every lifetime I ever lived and knows exactly why I came into this lifetime. So it was those greatest challenges that my soul needed to push me into doing what I came here to do. And I realized that. And so I know, Geraldine, you were speaking about death. For me, again, that's another word. I'm like, I know there's nothing but eternal life. I know it. It's not a belief. It's a knowing. And now that I know that, I honestly, I have to say I've never feared death. Even as a child, I didn't fear death, because even as a child, I knew that there was something beyond this 3D matrix, and whatever that something, even though didn't know what it was, but was whatever is beyond this 3D matrix, I knew had to be better than the 3D matrix. So even as a child, I remember thinking those thoughts. So I never had a fear of death. So that I can say the whole time I came out of my mom's body not fearing death. But I do know and understand that most people have this fear of death. But when they understand and know it, and they have to know it, I can't give them that knowing. They have to know it in their heart and soul. When you know there is no such thing as death, there's that totally nothing to fear, because it doesn't exist. All there is eternal life. And the life that you're creating here, we're creating this life in the 3D matrix, and we also create the life in spirit. So when we leave this body and we return to spirit, we're still creating. We are creating everything. And when we own it and then we treasure it, we're like thankful. We thank everything that's happening. No matter what it is, we're thankful for it. And we know that it's there to serve us.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much, Goddess Caroline. You talked about how we create our own reality, and we're also creating it in spirit. And with that, I would like to put a challenge out there for all of us and for anyone watching to create heaven here now, to create heaven here on earth, and not wait until we leave our bodies for everything to change to our preference. Let's make everything to our preference now. And a lot of that, it can be by looking at the fear And is it something that is controlling us, or is it something that's necessary? And when it is something that's controlling us, maybe we can change that to love and to unity, to bring everyone closer to us and really experience heaven here on earth.
I also, CD, I wanted to say about the laughter. Laughter is truly the best medicine. I just thought about this. I have a friend and he's a musician and performer. And anytime he'd be up on stage and he'd make a mistake, instead of getting all fearful about it, he'd bust out in laughter, because that would just, that just made everything like, oops, oh well. And he just laughs about it. I love that about him. But yes, that's another thing. When we do immediately get a fear response, we could laugh at it, if we choose to. And that will immediately change the situation. That will turn the situation completely around, because everything is energy. And that laughter is one of the greatest energies. So tell us a joke. I want to hear a joke from Goddess Gloria.
Oh my goodness, put me on the spot. And here I go blank. So all I can say is, as you're going through your day, know that all of it can be laughter. I think that's one of my immediate responses when I get nervous or when I get afraid. I start laughing and giggling as I'm trying to figure out, what do I do in this situation? I'll have to write some good jokes for you next time, Goddess Caroline. My mind just disappeared of all funniness at that moment.
If I may, there's something that I teach my clients, which is, it's really funny. It's when you're stressed out, or when you're angry about something, or when you're distraught about something going on, I teach my clients to imagine that you're wearing a big chicken suit, okay? And then imagine yourself in the chicken suit, and see if, looking at what you're looking, judging at what you're judging, can you possibly stay in that state of judgment, anger, frustration? And it really allows you to kind of check in with yourself and bring yourself back to a neutral place again. And also another technique in Qigong, we teach something called the shaking tree, where you actually shake yourself and twist from side to side. And this is an amazing way to kind of de-stress and decompress any suppression of energy and emotions in the body, and allow it to loosen up so that you can kind of come into that laughter, that joy, that more of a fun, free-flowing state. In fact, one of the highest states of spirituality, you can say, or the embodiment of this unity consciousness, is to come back to that childlike state, that innocence. Remember, when we're children, we don't judge anything because it's new. We're exploring, we're observing, and it's amazing that it's easy for us to kind of come into this joy and laughter. And this is an invitation that you guys can try this week, to kind of decompress and bring yourself back to a neutral state.
I love that. And I actually thought of a joke, but I need all of you to unmute yourself and participate. So are you ready? Here it goes.
Okay.
Knock, knock. Knock,
there?
knock.
Whoops.
Who's there?
Atch.
Achoo.
Achoo.
Oh gosh, thank you. Goddess Gloria.
That is funny. Yes.
That's funny. Well, it's going back to those jokes from when we were little kids, right? They're still just as funny as adults.
Well, Victoria, I was hoping that you would give us a process that you teach in your Transcendence course that helps people get out of their programming and out of fear. Could you share something?
One of the tools I use a lot of self-forgiveness. And I was just having this insight as we were talking about laughter, because a lot of our beliefs are actually very irrational. So if we can look at our beliefs and say, oh my gosh, that is actually completely irrational that I believe that. And then I'm also being reminded of insights that I share with a lot of my clients of what I was shown years ago is to make fun of everything. And I remember somebody saying, well, that's really hurtful to make fun of everything. And what that really means is to make fun with everything, because life is that we might have joy. It really is. So how can we look at our circumstances and make fun of them? And quite honestly, most of what we believe is completely irrational. And so as you're starting to feel these fears, really check, and is this an irrational belief that I have? And if it's an irrational belief that I have, I worry that, so worry is to wish for that thing you don't want, which is very much a fear-based belief. So every time you find yourself going into worry, you can stop yourself and say, wait a minute, this is completely irrational for me to even think this. And so one of the things you can do is to sit with that and say to yourself, I forgive myself for buying into this irrational belief. And my new belief is, and then create a belief that overrides that. So every time you find yourself going into an irrational belief, create an opposite belief that overwrites it. One of the reasons that this is so effective is that the human mind is actually continually being programmed. We have the ability to deprogram from all those other beliefs and reprogram ourselves with something even better. So whenever you go into an irrational, fear-based belief, you can reprogram yourself with a new, better, true, empowering belief. So it's a really simple way, if you catch yourself in fear, to ask yourself that question. Is this irrational? I forgive myself for believing this irrational belief, and my new belief is whatever that new belief is that you can then fill it in. Because once you let something go, you got to fill it with something else. Otherwise, that other thing might just pop right back in. So that's an easy tool for people.
I'm so glad you said, because I say it, I've been saying it since 2007. Worry, my definition of worry is praying for what you don't want to happen. Because what we focus on, we are creator beings. We do not realize how powerful we are. We only want to focus on what we want to see in the world. Yes, Goddess Gloria, we want to experience heaven on earth right here, right now, with these avatars, with these physical bodies. We don't want to leave our body, because in truth, in our lifetime, we will, because we are there. We're going to, we're on our way there. It's already here. We have to bring ourselves to it vibrationally, because it's already here. And that's heaven on earth, 5D. But we want to remember that being, raising our frequency, staying in love in every now moment, and not the worry. Some people, you were saying, Victoria, some people are addicted. And I can tell you, I know people that are addicted to worry. So it's like, okay, and we can all say that a lot of the time, 99% of the time, of what we worry about does not happen. Why give it that energy? So focus on something you want to happen. Give your attention to that. So that I say to everybody, and I even one of the things I wanted to bring up is the Truth and Freedom movement, which I've been very active from day one in the Truth and Freedom movement. And now a lot of the truthers I can't listen to, because they're sharing truth. They're sharing what's going on in this 3D matrix, but they're sharing it from that fear-based. If they share it, because I share truth all the time, but I share it from a high. I share it like, number one, the light is already won. We just have to go through the motions. Okay. So nothing to worry about, nothing to be afraid about, but here's the facts. Let me just give you the facts, and then you do your own homework. I always do it that way. I'm like, don't listen to what I'm saying. Here are the facts that I've discovered. You can take a look at them. You do your own homework, do your own research. And, but the light, whatever that information is, the light has already won. There's nothing to be afraid of. And now there's truthers I can't listen to anymore. I love you, truthers. I know you're trying to share information, but if the frequency, if the message is that same fear-based message that the mainstream is doing it with propaganda, and the truthers are doing it with truth. It's the same results. It's like, okay. So, but, and I know that I don't think they're doing it deliberately, especially the truthers. We want you to be ready. We want you to be ready, but we want you to be afraid and ready. Okay, no. Yes, we want you to be ready, but not in fear. Yes.
Right.
Well, we are the new kind of media. So not all media, all of us are out there with our shows and our work, saying a different story, empowering people, showing joy wherever we can. And that's what we're hoping to do with the Higher View.
That's right. Well, I thank you all for being here today. It has already been, our time is up. We've been here together for another show. It's been such an amazing time with all of you again this week. And we're doing it again next week. Same time, same place. We'll see you all again next week.
Thank you. Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you.